It had long been dark outside, and in Wendy's office the work was still going on. She was making sketches and rules. She was absorbed in the project, and she did not immediately notice when the boss came in. He stood in the doorway and said reproachfully, "Wendy, my dear, you don't take care of yourself. Have you looked at your watch? Don't you have a child to pick up? Everyone's gone long ago, and it's time for you to go. I appreciate your eagerness, but you can't work too hard." The woman came to her senses and gasped, "It's almost 7. It was time to pick up Alex from school. She immediately dropped everything and started to pack, muttering, "I'm really almost late. I'll run. Tomorrow we'll discuss a new design for the cape in the old style and at the same time on the latest fashion, so I decided to make a sketch while the idea came to mind. Goodbye." Wendy rushed off to the bus stop to pick up her son, while the director Steve scrutinized her sketches and wondered how this poor hardscrabble woman had so much talent and creativity. How does she manage to keep up with everything? She's got everything on her plate. A sick husband, son, household, and at work she took on everything, and sewed herself, and sketches made. There was no price for such a woman, and the director liked her very much as a person, and not only, he was mesmerized by her huge, sad gray eyes, literally drowned in them. But Wendy was all about her family, and she didn't look at anyone, so Steve could only sigh heavily, realizing that his dreams will never come true. Soaring Wendy came to the karate section. In the locker room, she was waiting for a frightened Alex. Mom, you came at last. Did you forget about me? All parents have already taken away. I'm sitting here alone for an hour. I was scared. My phone is dead. I can't get through." The woman pressed her son to her, began to whisper, "Well, I'm sorry, baby. I'm working too hard. Let's go home quickly. On the way to the store, we'll buy some goodies. Did you have a lot of lessons? How's school going?" Alex thawed and began to chirp, telling the news, and then proudly said, "And I've already learned my lessons while I was waiting for you. So don't worry. The exercises were easy. I did it by myself." Wendy hugged her son and praised him. "What a good boy you are, the best son I have. You help me so much and you study well. How lucky I am." The son really was her outlet, a light in the window, and after the death of his father tried to please his mother. Although he disliked his stepfather, he tolerated him for his mother's sake. When they got home, Wendy's second husband, Andrew, was lying on the couch, irritably pressing the buttons on the TV remote, flicking through the channels. He threw to his wife, "Hello, you're taking a long time. It's almost night and I'm hungry since lunch. Nobody needs me, you miserable cripple." The woman rushed to her husband. "Andrew, what are you saying? How is your leg today? Does it hurt a lot? I will now quickly prepare dinner and then again make a compress for you and a massage. I'll be right away." The husband thawed and waited for a delicious dinner, and little Alex frowned and thought to himself, "She doesn't feel sorry for her mom. She's tired as it is." He could have fried eggs and onions for himself. He walked slowly. The boy ran to the kitchen and began to help his mother cook dinner, peeling potatoes and cutting tomatoes. Wendy praised her son, and once again thought how lucky she was to have him. Then everyone ate, Alex went to his room to watch cartoons, and Wendy began to take care of her poor sick husband. She spent an hour with him, and after all the relaxing procedures he fell asleep contentedly. And Wendy came out of the shower, sat down in the chair, and just couldn't move. She was so tired. She suddenly felt fatigue. Since Andrew's illness, her life was like a nightmare. She was torn between her son, work, and her sick husband, and there was no time for herself and rest. Wendy tiredly closed her eyes and began to go over her life in her mind. She grew up in an intelligent family of professors. Her dad was a rector in the chemistry department, and her mom was a biologist. Her parents were fans of their work, and even at home they only talked about scientific theses and dissertations. A luxurious 2-room apartment in the center of the city was left to Wendy by her parents. Such a layout is rare now. High ceilings with stucco, a huge meterage, old expensive furniture, and glazed insulated loggia. All familiar families coming to their home always delighted with such a spacious living space, and more location is convenient, in a cozy, expensive neighborhood. Mother and father, of course, dreamed that Wendy would follow in their footsteps, become a scientist-chemist, continue the dynasty of scientists. But unfortunately or fortunately, she was a completely different child, with a humanitarian mind and a developed imagination. She hated all these formulas, exact sciences, but loved to draw, sculpt, and wrote essays better than anyone else in the class. And when she herself enrolled in a circle of cutting and sewing in the 8th grade, my mother finally realized, chemist from her daughter will not turn out. Sewing business so fascinated the girl that her parents decided to please her and bought an expensive singer machine. And now she sewed at home for her own pleasure, coming up with original outfits, analogs to which there were no. Outwardly, Wendy grew up a pretty girl, prominent, but always liked unlike no one, her own images, many of which successfully created herself. Therefore, on the street she always stood out favorably against the background of her friends. Many boys were after her, but the heart of a young fashionista is still silent. It goes without saying that Wendy went to study to be a designer. She did not see any other profession for herself. And in her final year she came to work on specialty in the atelier, and so there and stayed for the rest of her life. In the team she was respected and appreciated. She really always worked hard, but with burning eyes, with fire. She loved and valued her work. In the family, Wendy was a late child, so soon the parents quietly left at a rather advanced age, first mom, and recently daddy. The girl was very sad for them. She suddenly became so lonely in a huge 3-room apartment. There was no one to talk to, and so wanted to have a tea party with her mom, to hear from her words of support, advice, to see the kind eyes of her father. But they are, alas, no more. It was then, at the most crucial moment of her life, that Wendy met her first husband, Peter. He was a military man, serving in hot spots, and came home only occasionally, for visits and vacations. They met by chance, too, on the bus. A young brown-eyed soldier in uniform fell into Wendy's soul. He looked at her so much, jumped out after her at the bus stop, and began to awkwardly get acquainted. The guy didn't know how to compliment her at all and said some nonsense. Blushing, she laughed, so they became friends. Then they began to meet, and could not part, soon married. Peter was a little wordy, did not promise golden mountains, but loved her strongly, and she felt it. She was his faithful and devoted wife, waiting for him from his endless business trips. Soon Alex was born, and the husband was just happy, promised at the christening of his son that he would quit this dangerous job, and the last time will go to the hot spot. And so it turned out. Peter never came home again, so Wendy became a widow at 25. She could not get away from the grief for so long. She could not fall out of love with Peter, or not think about him. Only her son and her favorite job saved her. And then Andrew appeared in her life. He was the complete opposite of Peter. Self-confident, poor, beautifully courted, and took Wendy as an impregnable fortress, charm. He brought her flowers and read her love poems. She herself did not notice how she fell in love. To the son, Andrew was normal, and the couple decided to legalize the relationship. Mostly the groom insisted on it. Andrew was a builder, but nevertheless he often went on business trips, on the construction of complex objects, brought good money, in general, lived a good life. True, colleagues from the atelier for some reason skeptical of Wendy's new husband, and all her nauskivali. It's strange all this, Wendy. Well, okay, Peter was a military man, and all on the garrisons traveled around. There's no way out. Why would a construction worker need a business trip? Think about it. Don't we have enough construction projects in our city? The same good money, and you don't have to go anywhere. Something's fishy here. Look, as if later it turned out that he has a girlfriend or something worse, a second family. There's a lot of swindlers like that on TV these days. You don't even know the first thing about him. Here is Peter, your first husband. You're late. Quite a different matter. He introduced you to his parents first thing, invited you into the family. He did everything right. He didn't hide anything. What about this guy? He followed you around like a leaf. Who is he? What family is he from? We don't know anything. There was no one from him at the wedding party. Is that how it happens? And why did you rush into a wedding, you fool? You should have lived a little longer, seen what was what. Wendy was uncomfortable with such talk, and she parried. Oh, girls, stop reading me morals, weary. Well, you're right about something. Andrew doesn't like to remember his childhood. He says he doesn't communicate with his relatives. What do I care? I don't need to pry into his soul with questions. And all kinds of work happens. He brings good money from business trips, so it's all in the family. Don't get me worked up, for God's sake. Everything is fine with us, and soon it will be even better. A common child will be born. And Alex is happy. He's waiting for a brother or a sister. But recently there was a tragedy. At a construction site in a neighboring town, Andrew was hit by bricks. His foot and ankle were badly damaged. He came home in a cast. He wore it for a long time but still could not stand on his feet. His leg was not properly fused. He could barely walk with the help of a walker. In the future, he needed a complex operation on his joints. Of course, it was a great psychological trauma for the young, healthy guy. He felt incomplete, crippled, and it was as if he cut himself off from everything, went into himself. Wendy, of course, felt sorry for him, supported him as best she could, and took on herself all the housework, taking care of her son and providing for the family. Andrew was not working now, and this despite the fact that she herself was pregnant, albeit at a small term. Wendy got pregnant before her husband's injury. They did not plan to have children. Everything came out somehow unexpectedly and by itself. The husband took the pregnancy of his wife seemed to be good, but did not show his joy. But little Alex really wanted a brother or sister, and rejoiced that soon everything would happen. But now, when Andrew was lying down and not working, Wendy herself was not very happy about her situation. It was so hard. And what would happen when the baby was born? But what can you do? She already loved her baby inside her, even though it was the size of a bean, and decided that she would be strong and endure everything for the sake of her children. But Andrew's behavior was increasingly depressing and irritating her. He did not get involved in the family's affairs, was not interested in the success of her stepson, could at least read a book with him or put together puzzles. That's what a bad leg does not prevent. But her husband behaved like a small, capricious child, demanded affection and attention, and would not get up from the sofa at all. She was trying to stir him up. "Andrew, why are you so downhearted? At least go out on the loggia slowly, get some air. You can take your time and go outside. The second floor isn't the 9th floor, is it? I'll help you. Maybe you'll come to your senses faster. Well, life isn't over, and the leg will heal soon. You need to work on it, and I still have a doctor's appointment. You can't just give up on yourself like that. Aren't you at all curious about my day? How my son is doing? How am I feeling finally?" But the man only got annoyed and said reproachfully, "You do not understand me because you are healthy. And I feel bad. My leg is aching all the time. Painkillers don't help. I'm a worthless cripple." "You're selfish, Wendy. You only think about yourself. So what if you're pregnant? It's not a disease. What's the big deal? And I feel like a failure, lying here alone like a stump all day while you're away. And you come and reproach me." Such clashes were more and more frequent between them, and Wendy's home life now seemed like hell because of the constant grouchiness of her husband. And then there was this witch doctor. Her husband found her on the internet, on an ad. It said that an experienced witch doctor will help to get rid of diseases of the musculoskeletal system quickly and reliably. Her husband immediately caught on to the ad and began to call, although Wendy discouraged him, realizing that it was all a hoax and complete nonsense. But Andrew was hard to change his mind, and soon this charlatan came to their house for the first session. She was a nice-looking middle-aged lady, well-groomed, and at first glance did not look like a doctor or herbalist. She came once a week, she used her hands, she recited prayers, and she took a lot of money, by the way, from Wendy's paycheck. The wife tried to dissuade her husband as much as she could, explaining that it was just a common fraud. But he persisted, saying that her treatment was helping. It was getting easier. The pain was less. Maybe I would even get back on my feet soon. Then Wendy resigned herself to the placebo effect. Maybe her husband would believe in himself and his recovery, and he would actually walk. It happens. It was a normal working day. Wendy came home from work earlier than usual. Her son stayed home. He was a little sick. He didn't go to school. She saw a woman's unfamiliar shoes in the hallway and the acrid, sweet smell of strange women's perfume, and immediately realized that it was the witch doctor with the mysterious name of Camilla. The door to the kitchen was tightly closed. Wendy wanted to go in and say hello, but on a hunch she quietly walked over and listened to the conversation between her husband and the fortune teller. I wondered what they were doing and talking about, and most importantly, why had they closed the door? Andrew sharply reprimanded the fortune teller. "But Toma, my dear, I can't take it anymore. I'm tired of pretending to be infirm. All my sides are stiff. I'm lying there like a goose 24 hours a day. I've even gained weight. When are we going to get rid of that chicken in her cheeks? I'm sick to death of Wendy. I'm already dreaming about how we'll get this luxury apartment and I'll be free at last." The woman calmed him down. "Why are you being cranky? You think it's so easy to eliminate your wife and her son, and she was also pregnant. So you yourself have made my task more difficult. You have to take such a sin on your soul. But there's no way without it. Otherwise the children will be the heirs and you as a widower won't get anything. You can't be in a hurry. Last time we almost got caught in the act. We barely got away. I thought it was simple. A foolish bride, that's all. We're not going back to that town now. I'll soon get poison from a good friend, a reliable remedy. You'll pour a little of it into her and her son's tea. He says in a month at the most, the clients are guaranteed to be twisted up tight, and they won't be able to determine the cause. There'll be no trace in the blood. It'll look like severe poisoning, and you'll be clean. But you know, that's going to cost me a pretty penny. So just bear with it. What's wrong with you? This naive fool doesn't know anything yet. You're fed and fed and fed and fed. You lie here watching TV all day long. What's wrong with that? It's me, I think, who travels around, negotiates and solves our problems, not you. But then, after the funeral's over, we'll put the place up for sale, and I've already found a buyer." Wendy's hair stood up in horror. My God, the girls at work were right. Who had she taken in? She couldn't bear the horrible truth she'd just heard. Her first impulse was to enter sharply and expose the scoundrels, throw her husband and his mistress out. But she immediately cut herself off. And what will I charge them with? How will I prove their guilt? And she will again get away with it? No way. You have to act with a cool head. Andrew, wait till my tears are shed. It turns out you don't want me for nothing. And you bastard, you married me for the apartment and you insisted on marrying me. That's why you weren't very happy about the news of my pregnancy. It wasn't part of your plans. God, and I was leaving Alex with him, putting my son in danger. She tiptoed back into the hallway and slammed the door deliberately loud, and she shouted, "Hello, everybody, I'm home." Just then the door to the kitchen opened and the fortune teller came out. "Good afternoon, Wendy. We've just finished the session. Your spouse is gradually getting better. I hope my efforts are not in vain. I'm trying very hard. Don't forget, that'll be $2,000. Wendy was shaking. She wanted to grab her face and drag her away. But she exhaled, and as if nothing had happened, she replied, "Thank you, of course I remember. But you know, the payday is the day after tomorrow, and then we'll pay for 2 sessions at once. Okay? You know, only on my income we live. My husband is temporarily unemployed due to illness. Not much to go around." The fortune teller agreed and left, and Wendy had a dry conversation with her husband, fed him and went to her son, citing severe fatigue and headache. She physically could not and did not want to see Andrew now. His lies and hypocrisy was astounding. He as in no way pretended to be sick and complained about his health. The whole next day the woman was not herself. She could not concentrate on work. Everything fell out of her hands. She even cried several times in the toilet. She did not understand what she should do now, how to get out of the dangerous trap and expose the scoundrels. The director did not hide Wendy's condition. He watched her for a long time, and when all the staff went to lunch, decided to talk to her. "Wendy, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm minding my own business. What's wrong with you? I can see you've been crying. It hurts to look at you. Why don't you tell me? Maybe there's something I can do to help." And the woman, not expecting it from herself, told Steve everything. She had no one else to share it with. She'd known him for years. He wouldn't tell anyone. She even felt a little better when she talked it out. At the end she added, "I'm so scared. It turns out that I live under the same roof with a traitor and a murderer. What to do? How to punish him and protect myself and my son? I'm worried about Alex now." Steve frowned and answered, "Wendy, this is no longer a joke and not just a family conflict. The police are needed. I'm calling the investigator I know right now. You'll tell him everything. He's a reliable man. He'll help you. Here's my suggestion. You discreetly file your husband's walker and record the phone when he falls. If he's lying, you'll know right away, and you'll have proof. And I'll be ready with the police. We'll neutralize the bastard right away. Don't worry, you're not alone. I'm here to help you. I won't leave you in the lurch. If you only knew, Wendy, how many years I've loved you. Secretly and hopelessly. That's why I'll do anything for you." The woman suddenly looked at the director with completely different eyes, as if her rose-colored glasses had fallen off. And it was true that he had always been overprotective of her, helping her in everything, supporting her. And she, a fool, didn't notice anything, didn't see him as a man. Wendy whispered, "But I'm pregnant by another and I have a son, and in general." Steve grinned. "Yes, if you had 5 children it wouldn't scare me, because when you truly love a man you accept him as he is. Let's switch to you, since we went to such revelations. I don't demand anything from you, Wendy. I'm just ready to be there for you, you know?" The woman was relieved, and Steve's support gave her confidence. And after the conversation with the investigator, her fear receded a little. He promised to make inquiries about her husband and that herbalist and inform her of the results. In the meantime, he advised her to be careful, not to give herself away, and to eat and drink only what she had prepared herself. But Wendy did not listen. She could not delay. As soon as she saw her husband, she was shaking. Anger and resentment swarmed in her. That night in the bathroom, she carefully filed the walker with a hacksaw, turning the water to maximum so that the sound of the saw would not be noticeable. She couldn't wait to bring the villain to justice and not live in fear of what he and his mistress might come up with. In the morning, Andrew, as usual, began to get up, moved the walker closer. And Wendy immediately prepared the phone, pretending to write a message, and herself turned on the video recording. The husband, out of habit, leaned on the walker, and it suddenly folded under him. Andrew began to fall, instinctively grouped himself and stood on 2 legs, even jumped up from surprise. There was no injury or trauma, he was standing perfectly on both feet. Alex came running to the noise and saw everything. "Uncle Andrew, so you are not sick? You're cured? Wow, it's a miracle. Is there such a thing?" Wendy clapped her hands together. "Yes, dear. I see the witch doctor's sessions have done wonders for you. You're bouncing around. Aren't you ashamed to lie, Andrew? Why did you fake an illness?" The husband realized he'd been caught in the act and immediately went limp, tried to pretend he was sick. But Wendy cut him off. "Don't go on with this cheap show. My son and I are clear. There was no fracture. You made it all up." While Andrew was thinking about what to lie and how he could get away with it, the doorbell rang. Alex ran to open the door and Steve and the investigator entered the apartment. They dashingly twisted Andrew before he could get his bearings and said, "Citizen, you and your sister Linda are accused of attempted murder of Wendy, your wife and stepson Alex. You also have 4 similar crimes in neighboring towns. You've also found wealthy single women and gained their trust, and then fraudulently took their homes, successfully sold them, and lived happily ever after, profiting from their grief. But this time you went further, and for the sake of a luxurious 3-bedroom in the center of the city, you took the lives of the people who have warmed you in the apartment. That's why you're not getting out of jail anytime soon, I assure you." Andrew shouted like a madman. "That's not true. You can't prove anything. I'm a sick man. Wendy, they're all lying. I love you." The investigator waved his hand. "Stop this circus. Wendy already sent us the video of your miracle cure. And your sister was smarter than you, and she's already testifying against you. So you can yell all you want. You're not going to get away with this." Andrew got even more angry. "Oh, so Linda's going to dump me? Well, then I'm not going to keep my mouth shut. She's the one who thought up and did everything, and I was just seducing the ladies. That's right. You can't pin anything on me. Those fools were just clinging to me like cheburatas, flapping their ears and listening to my serenades. It's their own fault." Wendy couldn't believe it all. The investigator took Andrew away. She didn't even say goodbye to him. She didn't have the strength. And little Alex suddenly came up to Steve and gave him a little hand to shake, just like an adult, and said to him, "Thank you for helping Mommy. Uncle Andrew is bad. I don't like him. He doesn't like Mom. And he doesn't like me either. I always knew that. But I kept quiet. I didn't want to upset Mom. He's not coming back? I wouldn't want to live with him again." The man answered seriously, "No, Alex, he's not coming back. And I'll be there for you if you don't mind, because Mom needs help now." The boy rejoiced. "No, I don't mind. Come to us more often. You're cool." Just like in the movie, Uncle Andrew was exposed. He said he couldn't step on a foot, and then he did it, and then he galloped off. It was so funny. Wendy was in a kind of prostration, as if she couldn't see anything in front of her. She wasn't even crying, just swaying slightly from side to side. Steve whispered to Alex, "You stay in the nursery. I need to calm my mom down, you know? You don't need to listen to grown-up talk." The boy understood everything. He was smart, understood everything at once, and went to his room. And the man sat down next to Wendy, hugged her, and began to cradle her like a little girl. "That's enough, Wendy. Don't punish yourself. There's no need. It's over. Andrew and his sister will sit down for a long time and everything will get better." The woman, as the winding repeats, "Tell me, why am I so unlucky? The first husband died and lived, not really had time to live. The second was a swindler, and now he will go to jail, and I'm pregnant from him. What a beauty. I want to go to the noose. Are there no normal, decent men? Or is it something wrong with me and I attract bad luck? Why is it like this? Why do I choose the wrong ones?" Steve quietly replied, "Because you do not notice the one who has been with you all these years, looking for a hot bird of happiness, and do not notice the tit in your hands. Here I am, who loves you so selflessly, who will not betray you. Just look around." The woman suddenly clung to him, so sincerely and trustingly, like a little child, and said, "Thank you for having you. Thank you for everything, Steve." Since that day, Wendy's life began to change slowly for the better. Although the pregnancy was difficult, there was a strong toxicosis, and bad thoughts swarmed in her head. But Steve was always there to support her. Wendy divorced Andrew and signed with Steve. Only now she realized that this is the reliable and loving man she had dreamed of all her life. Their atelier blossomed, the business was gaining momentum, and one day Steve had to leave for a couple of days on a business trip to negotiate the sale of clothes in another city. There was nothing to portend trouble. Wendy felt relatively normal. And it was still early for her to give birth, a month to go. Suddenly her water broke during the night and she went into premature labor. She called an ambulance in a panic, losing consciousness, and only managed to ask her neighbor to sit with Alex. She was taken to the delivery room and all hell broke loose. She was in and out of consciousness. Everything was going wrong. The labor was very difficult. She saw the medics crouching in front of her as if in a fog, and she didn't recognize one of the nurses under the mask. It was Linda. She worked as a nurse at the maternity hospital. She had been released and not jailed, as Andrew had agreed to take all the blame. But this insidious and evil woman immediately recognized Wendy and decided to take revenge on her for everything. After all, she was the reason why her and her brother's plans had fallen apart and everything had come to light. When Wendy woke up, she immediately touched her stomach. It was gone. She jumped up, but she felt dizzy and a sharp pain in her stomach made her lie back down. She screamed, "Where is my baby? Bring him to me. Is he alive? What's wrong with him? Show me my son." The doctor came to her and looked at her with such pity and then said, "I'm sorry, Wendy, but your baby died. Double entanglement of the umbilical cord. We tried as much as we could to save his life, but it was futile. We're very sorry for your loss. Don't despair, you're still young. God willing, you'll have more children. It's true there are complications. You'll need some treatment." Wendy covered her face with her hands and screamed, howled like a beluga. She became hysterical and was sedated to bring her back to her senses. Then she turned her back to the wall and shut herself off, stopped talking altogether. She felt damaged, devastated, like a fish that had been gutted. Her breasts were full of milk. Her whole being demanded to take her baby in her arms, to love her. But he wasn't there, and he wasn't going to be. Steve, having heard from the neighbor what had happened, immediately arrived, began to comfort her as best he could. He understood how hard it was for her now. Wendy kept saying, "I'd rather die than my son. I don't want to live. I can't live. Why did I have to do all this? What are my sins? Why does God give children to cuckoos, and then they abandon them, and he took them away from me?" The man stroked her head, her shoulders, and whispered, "Don't say that, sweetheart. You have to move on for Alex's sake. What's his fault? He still needs his mom, don't forget that. I need you like air. It's okay, sweetheart. Time heals. It'll all blow over. I'll be here for you, don't worry." The baby was buried. The woman sobbed for a long time over the tiny grave, unable to come to terms with her loss. If it wasn't for her son Alex, Wendy wouldn't have been able to endure this grief. But the little boy was not by years old, and also, as he could, distracted, and helped his mother. Altogether they coped, but the pain of loss and thoughts about her baby, who never had time to see the white light, still no, yes, and arose in the woman's mind. Time ran away imperceptibly. 7 years passed. Atelier Caprice became very famous and popular in the city. Now not only the townspeople were dressed here, but also took wholesale orders, additionally rented 2 rooms. The business was gaining momentum. Wendy and Steve lived soul to soul. They were one and the same. They understood each other from half a word. Steve and Alex also got along well as best friends. The son became a teenager. He was seriously interested in sports, took prize-winning places, studied perfectly. One day Wendy was running from an important meeting across the crosswalk on foot. Her car was malfunctioning that day, so she took it to the service. On the steps, as usual, there were peddlers selling sundries and beggars with outstretched hands, and among them a little boy about 7 years old with crutches. He was so pathetic, so helpless, soiled, and dressed inappropriately for the weather, that the woman's heart suddenly snapped and she could not pass by. She bought a cinnamon bun and hot tea, went over to the little boy and gave him a treat. He looked at her with such gratitude, and immediately began to eat the treat, literally choking on the pastries. It was obvious that the child was very hungry. Wendy asked him, "Hello, sweetie. What's your name? Why are you begging and what happened to you? Don't be afraid of me, I won't hurt you. On the contrary, I want to help you." The boy finished his meal and began to tell. Hiding nothing, he somehow gained trust in this beautiful stranger with huge gray eyes. "My name is Anthony. I asked the older boys in the yard for a bicycle to ride, but it was very big for me, with a frame. So I slipped my leg under it, and so raced, and then I did not notice the steep turn, went tumbling, almost killed to death. And my leg was all fractured, so it's healed somehow. Now I just walk with crutches." Wendy asked, dumbfounded, "That's terrible. Didn't your parents go anywhere? You need to see a doctor. There must be something you can do. You're still growing." The boy sighed heavily. "Mommy drinks a lot and I don't know my daddy. Who needs me? She never took me anywhere. I was sick at home. She doesn't like me. She's mean. She doesn't cook and she doesn't work. She makes me stand here and then she takes my money and drinks it. And I'm so ashamed. I am like everyone else. I want to have a good and kind mom and dad, and to be loved. And when I grow up, I will never drink. Vodka is disgusting. It makes people nasty and evil." The child suddenly started crying, sniffling. Something unimaginable was going on in Wendy's soul. A storm of emotions, as if this strange alien boy were her own. She instinctively pressed him to herself, hugged him, and looked intently into his crying eyes. "Don't cry, Anthony. I'll help you. My husband and I will help you. I'll call him now. I have Steve. You know how good, kind. We'll cure you together. And I have a little boy, Alex. He's 13. My name's Wendy. Listen, where do you live? We can talk to your mom and get her to authorize your treatment. It's not going to work without it." The boy stopped crying, wiped his tears with his sleeve, and answered seriously in an adult way, "Nothing will work. Mom does not want to treat me. She needs me like this, sick. They're better served that way. Thank you for not passing by. If I had a mom like you, I'd be the best son in the world." And again something strange began to happen to Wendy, and she felt warm inside. And it hurt. And she felt sorry for this poor little baby, so small and not needed by his mother. She even got goosebumps from the words of the child. She did not recognize herself. She encouraged the child. "We'll see about that. Don't lose heart, Anthony. We'll fight for you. Children shouldn't have to suffer from neglectful parents." The woman immediately called her husband. Her voice was very excited. She told him everything and asked him to come immediately. Steve came quickly and listened attentively. He was a little surprised that Wendy was so worried to tears for a stranger's child, so penetrated by his misfortune. But he also felt sorry for Anthony, and agreed to go to his house and talk to his grief-stricken mother to give permission for the boy's treatment, and at the same time to see how this poor child lives, who is forced to beg for alms at the age of 7. This savagery was not in the couple's minds. Anthony showed them the way. It was near the crossing, for the poor child could hardly have traveled far on crutches. The house was old, barrack type, in the yards, obviously under demolition. As they climbed the dilapidated wooden steps, Even Wendy was afraid that they would fall down from old age. There was a knock on the door. No one opened. Anthony fussed and took a key out of his pants pocket and opened the door himself. They entered the apartment, and immediately, from the very threshold, they were knocked off their feet by the horrible musty odor of alcohol, cigarettes, dust, fish, and something else. Everywhere was dirty, not cleaned. And on the sofa, a shabby woman was lying apartment on her back, snoring loudly throughout the apartment. The boy sighed. Well, Mom has not woken up since the night, drank until morning with some uncles in the kitchen, so you can't talk to her for a long time. And then she wakes up and starts yelling at me, whether I brought money, and again goes to buy vodka and cigarettes. And if I don't bring enough, she scolds me a lot. I can't take it anymore. Why is she like that? Why does she drink vodka? Why doesn't she love me like all moms? Wendy and Steve just looked at each other meaningfully. They were shocked by what they saw, and without collusion they said, "You know what, Anthony? Why don't you come and stay with us? You can stay with us for a while. And we'll talk to Mom when she wakes up. We'll write her a note and leave it on the table, so she'll know where you are." The boy was so happy, he immediately began to pack. "I'll be right there. I'll pack quickly. Should I bring my things?" Wendy looked at his worn clothes that hadn't been washed in a long time and answered, "No, Anthony, there's no need. We'll stop at the children's store on the way and get you whatever toys and things you want. Don't worry about it. And tomorrow we'll go to the doctor and have him take a look at you. Okay?" The boy even roared with joy. He could not believe that all this was happening to him. The child threw himself on Wendy's neck and began to thank her. "Thank you, Aunt Wendy. You're like a fairy from a fairy tale, like a magician. I thought there was no such thing as magic in life. But it does." The woman smiled sadly, stroked his curly head and said, "You poor sufferer. Let's go. But let's call me and Steve on a first-name basis. All right? We're friends now, aren't we?" The couple bought the boy some new clothes, normal shoes, not the old trampled, shoddy sneakers he was wearing. Anthony chose a robot and a car in the toy department, and an even bigger children's encyclopedia. He had always dreamed of it. And everyone went home. Wendy couldn't think about work that day. The woman bathed the baby and carefully examined his foot. It wasn't for the faint-hearted. It really wasn't fused properly. The boy was fed heartily, dressed in clean new clothes, and he immediately warmed up and fell asleep on the couch, hugging the robot. The baby smiled serenely in his sleep, and Wendy consulted with her husband and Alex in the kitchen. "Steve, you've seen the horrible conditions in which Anthony lives. It's impossible. Such a smart, intelligent boy, and he had to be born to an alcoholic mom. Oh, my darlings, my darlings. I can't give him back. I feel so sorry for him. I have to take him to the doctor tomorrow to try and straighten his leg. It's twisted now. I need to know what you think about it. We're a family and I can't make these decisions on my own." The first to answer was the son, Alex, who supported his mother. "I personally don't mind if Anthony stays with us. The kid's been through enough with a mom like that. It's going to be hard on him. You're good, Mom, that you decided to help him. I promise I'll be a big brother to him. I'll teach him everything I know. I'll protect him in the yard. I won't hurt him." Wendy hugged her son. "Thank you, son. I knew you would understand me. You've always been a kind and sympathetic child. Honey, what do you think? It's very important to me." Steve was silent for a long time thinking, then answered, "I also do not mind, but here you need to understand, or we go to the end, treat the boy and achieve his adoption, and it will be a long trial and litigation. I'm somehow sure that the mother does not want to lose their source of income, a sick son, and will not give it for nothing. And you have to be prepared for that. Or do not bother the child's soul at all. It is impossible to rush back and forth. What would it be like for him to go back to his hovel? Wendy, but you must also realize that you, as a woman, will have to be patient, a long way of treatment, to bring up someone else's child as a native, to love him. Are you ready for that?" The woman put her hand on her husband's arm and answered seriously, "I saw him, unhappy there, in the subway passage. Something turned over in me, believe it or not. He is no longer a stranger to me, you know. I want to give this little misery-stricken little man a normal, happy childhood, like you, me, our son Alex had. Doesn't he deserve that? What will he grow up to be with that drunken mom? At best vocational school, At worst, he'll go down a crooked path, get angry, get drunk, or go to jail. We all together can help him to become a normal person, to find his vocation, profession, the ability to walk after all. I agree to fight for Anthony and go to the end. Thank you, family, for hearing me and supporting me. The next day, Wendy took the boy to a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. He examined the boy, took x-rays and a CT scan, studied everything for a long time, and then came to a verdict. Yes, the leg is neglected, what can I say? It will require a complex operation on the knee joint and ankle, and then a long rehabilitation. Shoes will wear special orthopedic. But in 6 months or so, the leg should be back in place, I think so. So, do you agree? Anthony was the first one to yell, I'm willing to put up with anything just to ride my bike and run again. Aunt Wendy, help me. I promise I'll obey and I promise I won't be naughty. I was in so much pain when I fell off my bike and I didn't whine. I put up with it. I'll take it now. I'm so tired of children laughing at me, teasing me with a limp. The woman hugged the baby and replied, Don't worry, everything will be fine. My husband and I will pay for the operation. I will be with you. We just need to persuade your mom to do it. Everything depends on it now. The conversation with the grief-stricken mom was long and difficult. Wendy and Steve caught her drunk again and barely brought her to her senses by washing her with cold water. Then they spent a long time telling her who they were and what they wanted from her. They told her about the doctor's consultation and showed her son's diagnosis. They tried to convey to her clouded consciousness that her son should be operated on immediately, otherwise he might be lame for life. Hélène, an impregnated woman, shouted like a slaughtered woman, Who are you to control the fate of my son? I'm a mother, and I won't put my blood under the knife. He's my breadwinner. I want my son home now. Wendy was indignant and tried to get through to the grieving mother first. How can't you understand? You're condemning Anthony to a disability. Doesn't it hurt your heart that he can barely walk with crutches? And then what? How's he gonna live? Have you thought about that? I beg you, sign the consent for the operation. Let the boy be healthy again. Is your mother's heart of stone? We take care of all the expenses. We just need your signature. Hélène threw back her unwashed tresses and shouted even more. It's none of your damn business how I raise my child. Did you give birth to it? I said no. And if you don't return the child, I'll call the police and say you kidnapped him. Steve couldn't take it anymore and pounded his fist on the table. Call the police, go ahead. And my wife and I will just show you the conditions in which you, a drunken suburban son, raise a son. It's unsanitary. Anthony will be taken to an orphanage, and you'll lose your rights to the child. Now sign it. And this is just to help you think. You're only interested in drinking. And the man put a couple of bottles of alcohol and a bag of food on the table. He watched the reaction of the woman. Ellen instantly assessed the situation, without looking at everything signed, and began to lament. Why so immediately? I love my son, but we just live poor. I cannot find a job, so I drink sometimes with grief. And Steve thought to himself, such drunkards should be forbidden to give birth. It's a crime to condemn a child to torture. Wendy and Steve immediately flew out of the stinking apartment with the cockroaches that were crawling around in hordes. Outside, they both exhaled, took a breath, and almost in unison said, No, Anthony can't go back there, period. What kind of life is that for a little kid? How did he even last 7 years? I don't know what he grew up on. Wendy began to prepare the baby for surgery. All the tests were taken. The doctor asked all the family members to give blood in case something goes wrong and we have to do a transfusion, to understand whether someone's blood would be suitable or not. A day later, the results came back and the doctor was dumbfounded. It's unbelievable, but you, Wendy, and Anthony have the same rare blood type and phenotype. It happens only in blood relatives. There are no other options. Is the boy a close relative of yours? The woman twisted her head negatively and told everything, where and how she met the child. It's just impossible. He has a grief alcoholic mother. We're just helping him. I don't think it's true that we're related. How else can it be verified? The doctor replied, Submit the material for genetic examination. It will indicate exactly. You're still preparing. The operation's in a week. But I assure you that you are related without any examination. You even look alike, haven't you noticed? Wendy told Steve everything. He only wondered, then looked at Anthony and Wendy for a long time and answered, And the doctor was right. How could we not notice? Here, take out your baby pictures. Look, the same eye shape and color, and hair exactly like yours. It's strange. I don't understand anything yet, but let's do an examination. We'll see. Wendy took the forensics to the lab. Meanwhile, Anthony went into surgery. The woman was so anxious as she walked in, so worried, even surprised herself. They had known each other for a week or two, but it seemed as if it was her own child lying on the operating table. These long 3 hours seemed like an eternity to Wendy. She drank a liter of coffee from the vending machine and walked back and forth, praying that the surgeon's hand would not waver. The doctor finally came out of the operating room rejoicing. Everything had been a success. There was a long recovery ahead. Wendy didn't get enough sleep, took a leave of absence from work, and was with the boy all the time, feeding him homemade soups and fruit, filling him with sweets, reading books, and distracting him from painful procedures. They became so close to Anthony, as if they were family. The boy reached out to her, bravely endured all the procedures, tried to please her, learned poems and cursive words. One day an excited Steve entered the ward. He shook some papers and, unable to restrain himself, almost shouted, "Wendy, I'm going to tell you something. You better sit down or you'll fall. I took the results of the examination as you asked. You were right, and so was the doctor. Anthony's your real son. There's a 99% chance. Do you understand that? Here, read it." The woman looked at her husband dumbfounded and exclaimed, "It turns out that then in the hospital I did not give birth to a dead child? It turns out that my child was alive. But then who was given to us? Who did we bury? Oh my God, this is horrible. I feel sick." Anthony also blinked a lot and didn't understand anything. "So you are my real mom? Wow, that's cool. What about that mom who drinks? Isn't Ellen's mom my real mom?" Wendy hugged the boy. "That's right, son. My darling. My darling. My darling. I'm so glad you've turned up, that you're alive. They told us that you were dead. I'm sorry, baby. I didn't know anything about you. I've got to find out how it happened. I'm not going to give you to anyone now, do you hear me? My little snub-nosed sunshine." The child snuggled up to her, kissed her, and said, "I'm so glad that you are my real mom." And he didn't want to go home to Ellen's mom. So now I have a mommy and a daddy and a little brother. I wanted it so much, I dreamed so much. And now all my wishes have come true. Now I'm the happiest man alive. Steve hired a private detective and told him all about the incident at the maternity hospital, and about saving Anthony, and about the examination. And he asked him to unravel the mystery. I mean, somebody obviously switched the babies on purpose. That's a felony. Anthony slowly recovered. The treatment gave good results, and he could already walk, only with a slight limp without crutches. His leg was back in place. Then there was a court. On the basis of expert examination, Wendy was recognized as the birth mother, and grief mother Ellen was deprived of maternal rights, although it was not without nervousness. In fact, she didn't need her son. She never took care of him. He grew by himself, like a wattle in the field. But when Ellen realized that now we'll lose payments, she immediately remembered about her son. She persuaded Anthony to come back, sang songs about how much she loved and missed him. But the boy remembered too well her slaps and slaps, hunger and poverty. Except for the rude attitude and shouts of the eternally disgruntled mother, he had known nothing since childhood. And now he was bathed in love and care of his new mom, Wendy, lived in a normal family. With his brother, they got along well. Now the kid had his own room. Steve even installed a children's sports slide there for his son to do exercises and develop. That's why Anthony did not want to live with Ellen in any way and was even afraid of her. He was eternally grateful and loved his new parents, and tried to please them. Detectives took up the case professionally, and everything was found out. It turned out that Linda had stolen Wendy's baby and swapped it with the stillborn child of the same Helen, who was in labor in the neighboring delivery room on the same day and hour. Wendy, when she heard about it, almost screamed, but how could she? She was supposed to go to jail with Andrew, the crook. They were cheating people together, weren't they? I want to find that wretch and look into her shameless eyes. I want to ask her why she did it. Why did she decide to break my life and my son's life so cruelly? The detective replied, "Life is wiser than we are. It has already punished this woman. Linda's in hospice care now. She's terminally ill. She's lying there, alone and alone, writhing in pain. No one visits her. Andrew, her brother, died in prison of tuberculosis. I'll give you the address if you want it. You can visit her." The next day, Wendy went to the hospice, her heart racing. She imagined how she would say everything to that bastard who had deprived her of motherhood for 7 years, and if it hadn't been for the happy meeting with Anthony, the baby would have been suffering with an alcoholic mother, and she herself would have continued to mourn her stillborn baby. But when she entered the room, she gasped. On the stale, laundered bed lay a thin, haggard old woman with droopy eyes. Not a trace of her former beauty remained. Wendy stared at Linda in silence, unable to utter a word. She opened her eyes and recognized Wendy, clenched her fists and began to speak in a hoarse, broken voice. "Why did you come here? To make fun of me? Yes, I'm dying. My days are numbered. Be happy. That's what you've always dreamed of, isn't it?" Wendy asked me point blank. "Why did you switch the children? I know everything. You're such a bitch. What did I ever do to you?" "I thought my baby was dead all these years, and it was a miracle I found him." Linda grimaced in pain. Her face became like a grin, and she hissed, "I wanted to punish you, to avenge my brother who went to prison for a long time because of you. And I did it perfectly. Just like I wanted." Wendy answered her. "I was walking and thought how I would tell you everything. And now I look, and I don't even want to talk to you. The universe has already done everything for me, and punished you with a terrible disease. And I don't feel sorry for you because you've never repented, so you deserve it all." Wendy left without even a glance at Linda, but she beat her fists on the sheets and hissed angrily, wriggling, still blaming Wendy for everything, not realizing that she was the one who had ruined her life, because she and her brother had done nothing but mean things, and now they were paying for it. The woman came home. It was so warm and cozy. Alex was studying with Anthony and taught him to solve examples on apples, laying them out on the table. Steve was busy in the kitchen and cooked an omelet with ham and tomatoes. When they saw Wendy, everyone immediately rushed over to her. "Hooray! Mommy's here. We missed you. How are you? Where have you been? You look a little sad today." The woman sat down next to the kids and Steve and said quietly, "I realize today how much I love you all. I have 2 such wonderful boys, my favorite sons, and a wonderful, most faithful and loving husband. I also have a favorite job that I go to every day with joy. So I am very lucky." "That's right," Steve suddenly said, laying out the omelet. "We have here all manly consulted, my love, and this is what we decided. We really miss having a little girl in the house. Mischievous with pigtails, beautiful like our mom, and smart like our dad. How do you feel about our proposal?" He playfully put his arms around Wendy and pulled her gently against him. She laughed, melted from his embrace, and replied, "And I don't mind at all. A daughter is wonderful. Daddy and I will think about it, I promise. Well, sit down to dinner." Everyone ate with appetite, talked cheerfully about everything in the world. Anthony was a part of their family, and he felt it. Everyone in the house was happy. After all, no matter what happened, they stood proud for each other. At last all sorrows and troubles had receded, and there was only happiness ahead.